welcome to the week 12 Rad Avenger League preview. Holy shit, we're on week 12 already. Oh my god. Some crazy stuff this week. Yesterday, whether you've watched it or not, I posted a quick breakdown of where we stand as far as the playoffs go. So not going to talk about rankings and seeding and all that too much, just because I did it a lot yesterday. However, I will use some of that info here, breaking down individual games. Real quick, I will go over what the rankings look like compared to last week. So Raleigh and Cameron still your 1 and 2. Raleigh off of his third loss in a row. Crazy. So Cameron sitting there in second place. Andrew jumps all the way into third place at 7 and 4, taking over Charlie, who is also 7 and 4 at this point. Then you have me and Wade at 6 and 5 and 5 and 6 in the rankings. Tim dropping to 7th at 5 and 6, and then Trevor, John, and Ashley in that order, all eliminated from playoff contention at this point. So I'm just kind of playing for pride and getting warmed up for the consolation bracket for them. Let's go ahead and switch over to looking at what happened on the waiver wires this week. We have Tim picking up Juwan Johnson, Raleigh adding Darius Slayton, Tim adding Traylon Burks, Cam Akers back in the mix for Raleigh. Andrew picking up some P. Ryan off of the Joe Mixon injury. Tim going Latavius Murray off of the Melvin Gordon getting cut news. And that's actually it for this week. You know, defenses and kickers as usual. But that was very slim pickings this week. The only real injury I think we had an update on was Joe Mixon. We'll see if he plays or not. And then obviously with Darrell Henderson getting cut, that's where Cam Akers has kind of come back into play. Same thing with Latavius Murray and Melvin Gordon getting cut. So, very quickly here, we'll just jump right back into the games. Sorry, I forgot to turn my speakers off. Didn't want feedback in the microphone. Jumping into the games. So only one game this week between teams that are out of contention. Everybody else, every other game involves at least one person who is still fighting for a playoff spot, or at least jockeying for seeding position. So we'll start as we always do with our first place team, which is Raleigh playing Andrew, and actually one of the more important games this week. Andrew losing opens things wide open for everyone in the top 6 to 7, making a run into the playoffs. So, and then I mentioned yesterday in the playoff preview that if Andrew were to win this game, that opens up the door for some possibilities for Raleigh to actually miss the playoffs, which is interesting. But as far as the actual games themselves, excuse me. So we are still waiting on some confirmation for Joe Mixon, but as we found out last week, if Samaje Perine has to go, it may not be it's one of the better handcuff options in the league at this point. Fucking Perine had 3 touchdowns. Just 3 weeks after Mixon had 5 touchdowns. So the Bengals kind of proving that no matter who is carrying the ball in this offense, they can score. So not necessarily a massive concern. They do have a tough matchup against the Titans this week, allowing the 7th fewest points to opposing running backs. And that game being in Nashville, so a little bit of a matchup situation going on. But the Bengals can score. I wouldn't really worry about either one of them too much. Do have some injuries on Raleigh's team that we're still kind of waiting on 100% confirmation for. Aaron Jones, kind of dealing with some injuries here. Let's see. Did practice limited on Wednesday. Luckily none of these people are playing on Thanksgiving, so some extra time to recover here. If Aaron Jones can go, the Eagles kind of look like they figured it out against the run last week. I think they gave up 50 yards and a touchdown to Jonathan Taylor on the opening drive, and then I think he had maybe 30 or 40 yards the whole rest of the game. So with Sue coming in, Eagles may have figured out what they can do with the with controlling the run there. But this will be a little bit better of a test, obviously, when you have the threat of Aaron Rodgers, and even if he's old and kind of decrepit Aaron Rodgers. being able to throw over the top, that kind of softens things up in the run game. So we'll see what the Eagles can do there. And then Lamar Jackson dealing with some stuff. Mispractice due to hip injury. Yeah, looks like he's let him rest, but he should be able to play. And then he gets a very, very favorable matchup against the Jags if he is able to go. Yeah, those are your injuries. And then Jamar Chase is slated to make his return. And if he is able to go for Raleigh, Tennessee, as good as they are at slowing down the run, has been just atrocious against the pass this year, allowing 40.5 points a game to opposing fantasy wide receivers. We've seen the Bengals offense. They've been good, but it's been fed through the running backs with Chase's injury out. I mean, or just on the other side for Andrew, you have Tyler Boyd, who we all thought was popping off. I tried to make a trade for him once Chase went down. In the game since Chase went down, which week did Chase go out? He hasn't played since week 8. So since week 8, Tyler Boyd has put up 11.3, 6.9, and 5.2. So, and I think T. Higgins has had a better stat line, but it's not too much better. In fact, Ashley's right there, so we can go check it. T. Higgins, week 8, 12.4, 9.5, and then last week had 148 yards. So he finally had a breakout game, but against the Steelers, who also really bad against the pass. The offense runs through Jamar Chase. I mean, there's no questioning it at this point. Also for Raleigh, Isaiah Pacheco has firmly taken over the Chiefs' backfield, and he's only going to get more involved now that CEH is on IR. So kind of look for him to have an explosion. He does have a tough matchup against the Rams, who, as bad as they are, still a solid defense. So we'll see what can happen there. But always trust. I mean, fewer touches going to Clyde is going to be good for Pacheco, and he's the workhorse back there. On the other side, speaking of workhorse backs, Zeke was finally back next week, and it didn't really look like it mattered for Tony Pollard. 80 yards on the ground, 109 receiving yards, 2 more touchdowns. Since kind of taking over as the lead back, he has had 6 touchdowns in 3 games, 4 weeks with a bye week there. And in all 3 of those games has gone over 200 yards from scrimmage. So in week 8, he had 131 yards on the ground and 16 through the air. Had 3 touchdowns in that game against Chicago. Week 10 against Green Bay, 115 on the ground, a touchdown, and 13 more through the air. And then last week I just said 80 and 109 with 2 touchdowns receiving. Just insane numbers. And the Giants kind of look like they kind of finally look like the Giants we've been waiting to show up all year. I still think Dable's an incredible coach. I think this team could be fighting for a playoff spot. But what we saw last week and the week before kind of looks more like the Giants that I was expecting to come out this year. So I think the Cowboys should be able to handle their business there pretty easily. And then getting into the wide receivers, Tyler Boyd, I talked about him. Gabe Davis against Detroit. I mean, Gabe Davis is still kind of your boomer bust guy. 2 weeks ago against Minnesota, he had a great week. Last week, he had a very average week. Detroit, if you're going to be able to get behind a secondary, this is the one. So I don't really know how to handicap Gabe Davis, but he's playing against a bad defense. I expect to see some things there. Talked about Jamar Chase coming back. If he's healthy, he should light up the Titans defense. And then DeAndre Hopkins playing against the Chargers defense, who is less than ideal. He also gets Kyler Murray back. I know Colt McCoy had the great game there. But since coming back, his yardage totals 103, 159, 36, 98, and 91. Has 2 touchdowns in 4 weeks. So it's D-Hop. We know what to expect from him. Kyler Murray back and against a bad defense and a good offense. I think we'll see a shootout in that game. So we should just see points, and D-Hop should get fed. And now we have Najee, who kind of looks a little bit back. Last week against the Bengals, who have a solid defense. I mean, they're not pushovers. 90 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns, 26 more through the air. I think that's his first 100-yard game this season. It is 100 yards from scrimmage. Obviously, he didn't have 100 rushing yards. Actually, the week before he had 99. That's funny. Gets a very middle of the road Colts defense on Monday night. Honestly, if Najee can come out and run the ball, that game might last 2 hours. The Colts, the way they want to run the ball with JT, yeah, that game might be over really, really fast. I can see both teams just kind of pounding the rock there. The website has this scored as a 113 to 107 advantage for Andrew. And a lot of that, I mean, oh god, Travis Kelce is projected 18 points against the Rams. It's so many, but also like it's not enough. Yeah, Travis Kelce is really kind of the game changer here. However, having said that, with the receivers coming back, I also think the website here is not giving Pacheco enough love for being the starter there. I do think Riley gets back in the win column. Part of this is because I need it to happen, obviously for selfish reasons to get myself in the playoffs, but I do think Riley kind of gets his mojo back and starts to figure it out for the playoffs and creates an interesting little scenario to try to figure out who the fourth spot is going to be. So Riley gets the dub here over Andrew. Wow, I was about to say I'm moving on to your second place team, and I clicked Charlie. That's not true. Second place team, let's go to Cameron with a matchup against Tim. A must win for Tim to have any hopes of making the playoffs. He does still have a path there. I showed it in the video yesterday. It's very, very slim, and I think there's literally only one option, but there is a path. However, part one is beating Cameron, which sorry, my cat's making biscuits in my didn't know what was going on. Part of that is beating Cameron, which just looking at these lineups and these matchups, I don't 100% foresee happening. In fact, I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm picking Cameron. So that's spoiler alert. And part of the reason here, I mean, Josh Allen against Detroit, I think you're probably looking at a 30-point game from him when you talk about what he can do with his legs. Getting to Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. The problem is, if Josh Allen has a big game, you assume that Stephon Diggs does as well, and that's sitting there looming on the other side. So anything Josh Allen does is just immediately getting neutralized by Stephon Diggs. And then we go into the running back matchups here. We did just have a trade today that kind of changed the outlook of this matchup, because originally it was supposed to be Dalvin Cook and Eckler against Kamara and Barkley, which is honestly, at that point, with Kamara going up against the 49ers and Barkley playing the Cowboys, I would actually have given that edge to Cook and Eckler, because they have the much better matchups, much more favorable matchups. But now we're looking at Cordero Patterson, Austin Eckler, and Latavius Murray against Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, and Dalvin Cook. I don't love it. And then when you get into wide receivers, we're talking about Tyler Lockett and Stephon Diggs. Tyler Lockett playing the Raiders, Stephon Diggs playing the Lions. Two very, very, very favorable matchups where these wide receivers should go off. Stephon Diggs especially against Christian Kirk and Jordan Palmer. I mean, Jordan Palmer, I'll actually start with Christian Kirk, because he started the year on my team and has bounced around now a little bit. Coming off of his best game of maybe his career, I don't remember Christian Kirk ever having a stat line like this. 105 yards, 2 touchdowns, 27 points against Kansas City. And Baltimore, kind of a very similar defense he's playing against. However, Baltimore's been playing a lot better as of late as far as the defense goes. I mean, they just came off, it's the Panthers. I completely understand that, but just dismantled them defensively. Now the Panthers did dismantle them right back, but it's neither here nor there. Jordan Palmer does get Josh Palmer. Who's Jordan Palmer? Josh Palmer gets a very favorable matchup against the Cardinals. Problem is, there's just, Keenan Allen's back, and I know you're gonna sit there and say, that he had the exact same thing last week, and that's fair, but Keenan Allen couldn't fully practice and has been out since week 1. Getting him back into the offense, getting him back into the groove, takes a little bit of time. And Mike Williams, we'll see what's going on with him. Brandon Staley said it was just a small re-aggravation, but we'll see if he comes back. If both of them are back, I don't like Josh Palmer at all. Having said that, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are both in the lineup, and Palmer caught a 60-yard touchdown. So 106 yards, 2 touchdowns, 26.6 points. Once again, Tim chasing the high a little bit there. But Tyler Lockett, Stephon Diggs, I mean, those are guarantees. Christian Kirk and Josh Palmer are at this point kind of flyers. So we'll see how it works out. I don't particularly love the matchup. And we talked about Latavius Murray getting picked up off of Melvin Gordon being cut. It does get he gets the Panthers. However bad the Broncos are, they should be able to just hand Latavius Murray the ball and get him yards against the Panthers. Coming off of his best week of the season, 49 yards on the ground, 23 through the air, and then adding a score there, had 15.2 points. And without Melvin Gordon eating up carries, Latavius should be the workhorse back there. Yeah, I mean, and then looking at the bench here, Keenan Allen may make his first appearance this year in Cameron's lineup, depending on how he likes the running backs. I think I let it ride as he has it. Let Keenan get one more week to get healthy, and then kind of go matchup based on Keenan versus Lockett there. But I do think Cameron's gonna win here. I mean, these matchups, the running back matchups are tough, and that's where Tim can make up some ground. But we've seen Cordell Patterson the last couple weeks, and for whatever reason, the Falcons are still a timeshare, and the Commanders' defense has looked really, really good, and I think they should be getting Chase Young back this week. I thought he was supposed to be back last week, so who knows at this point. But the Commanders very quietly have a pretty solid run defense. Very quietly, they just have a really, really solid team. So Cameron gets the dub here, and finally officially ends Tim's season that I feel like has ended 4 or 5 times at this point. So now we'll go over to Charlie's game because he's your third place team. So Charlie playing John. John finally has been officially eliminated. John is out of playoff contention. 3-8, can't come back from it just mathematically. Charlie, however, still has a path to drop out of the playoffs if he were to drop his last 2 games. End up in some tiebreaker scenarios that he would not win, or honestly, he could just be out on record. There's a chance for 4 other teams to get up to 8 and 5 and get in over him. However, with a win this week, Charlie should all but lock up with his playoff spot. So we'll see what he can do there. He is projected to lose 112 to 107. Closer to 113 actually, 112.92. John's team though has had a history of falling a little bit flat here. We've seen him put up 157. Charlie's coming off of his best week of the season, maybe his best week ever. Hung 160 on yours truly last week. George Pickens had a touchdown. Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry did their thing. Actually, Nick Chubb did not do his thing, but Amari Cooper more than made up for it with 27 points. Derrick Henry threw a touchdown pass just right in my face, so that was sick. And going back to Cincinnati, since week 8 when Jamar Chase was out, Joe Burrow's looked a little pedestrian. 14 points, 19 points, which pretty solid week there considering how quarterbacks have looked this year. Last week had a big bounce back though, and most of those passes were to Samaje. He had 355 yards, 4 touchdowns. Did throw 2 interceptions, so total of 6 interceptions against the Steelers this year. But we talked about Tennessee's pass defense not being great and Jamar Chase being back. I think Joe Burrow's poised to have just a monster week. But same thing with Geno Smith on the other side. I mean, the Raiders are bad. Like, it's not even, they are bad. Did pick up a win last week against the Broncos. But that's the Broncos, so whatever. Yeah, the Seahawks should be able to move the ball pretty effectively. Geno Smith has looked good all year. I think Geno Smith can go step for step with Joe Burrow this week. The only problem here is I legitimately think the Seahawks might blow out the Raiders and kind of limit Geno Smith's total upside here just because they have to stop throwing the ball. Christian McCaffrey, what did he do last week? I actually didn't watch the game this week. 14 points, 39 yards rushing, 67 through the air, was kept out of the end zone for the first time since joining since joining the 49ers, so that's fun. Gets New Orleans, a team that looks like it might have completely given up, and I don't know why you give up, because you don't have a first round draft pick, so you might as well win. But yeah, he's going to be a 13-14 point machine if he scores touchdowns. Obviously, a lot of touchdown upside, potential for a 30 burger at any given time. Derrick Henry is playing Cincinnati. I don't think they've played since the playoff matchup last year, and obviously I know Derrick Henry was in that game. But you know, it's wintertime, it's getting cold. Derrick Henry's getting fed. That's all he does. Nick Chubb playing the Buccaneers, who still have a really good run defense, number 3 against opposing running backs in fantasy. And Nick Chubb's had a tough couple matchups. Charlie, I'm going to give you the good news. I'm going to start with the bad news. You played the Bills, and they limited Chubb to 8.2 points, his lowest total by far of the year. Actually, against New England, he had 7.5, so second lowest total. I think you may be in for a very similar week against the Bucs. I think they're going to go all out to stop the run, and then maybe Amari Cooper can make it up for you again on the other side. The good news here, you get the Texans next week. So even if Deshaun Watson comes out and looks like ass cheeks, even if he snaps his ACL and karmic retribution on the first play, Nick Chubb will probably run for 400 yards against the damn Texans. So there's your good news. If you can make it through this week with Chubb putting up average numbers, he should go just absolutely nuclear next week. Speaking of Amari Cooper, as good as the Bucs rush defense is, their pass defense is pretty remarkably average. Last week, Amari Cooper, 113 yards, 2 touchdowns, 27.3 points. Like I said, he made up for every point that Nick Chubb didn't get, Amari Cooper got. Just a monster week. And then Amon-Ra, he does have a little bit of a matchup issue with the Bills. I will talk about the Bills a little bit. Bills, they had a tough week last week with the, obviously not on the football field. They killed the Browns. But with the snowstorm moving to Detroit late, kind of the dangers there. That defense may be a little winded. Maybe looking ahead to the kind of the mini bye here. I do expect the Bills and Lions game to have some points in it. So just something to keep an eye on there. And I do think Amon-Ra can get some points through the air. Then jumping over to John's team. Oh, George, I didn't even talk about George Kittle. Hold on. Normally I don't even mention tight ends because they're such a crapshoot, but god damn, George Kittle. 84 yards, 2 touchdowns, 22.4 points. Just an absolute monster. Anyway, speaking of tight ends, at least John gets David Njoku back. Last week he had 2 catches for 17 yards. So a little bit more time to rest. Maybe you can do something there. Travis Etienne against the Ravens. That offense is kind of run through Travis Etienne. He did get his worst game since taking over as the full-time starter against Kansas City a couple weeks ago, but a lot of the game script there had them throwing the ball early. Sorry. Talking a lot real fast and take a minute to breathe. A lot of the game script had them running early and often. Christian Kirk just eating up touches all day. So I expect a little bit of a return to form here. Maybe not the 23 and 25 points we saw in those back-to-back weeks against the Broncos and the Raiders, but something to tune of 15 to 18, a touchdown. Maybe throws a second one in there. AJ Brown against the Packers. I do think the Eagles do get back on track this week. If they don't, it gets a little scary for them because obviously they lost to the Commanders. They turn around and lose to the Packers. That's 2 NFC teams you really don't want to lose to, especially getting ready for the playoffs. Not that the Packers are going to be there at this point, but still a game you got to kind of figure out and win. Sunday Night Football, prime time. I do think AJ Brown has another big performance, and the Eagles kind of right the ship there. And then DK Metcalf is just going to chew up the Raiders. And this is kind of a DK Metcalf revenge game. Obviously, he started the year on Charlie's team, was traded to Tim, and then traded to John for a couple pieces that I can't remember. Damian Pierce has laid a turd last week. 8 yards rushing, 9 yards receiving. Really bad. Kyle Allen has been named the starter, so I don't know how much the Texans are going to throw the ball. The Texans are a dumpster fire, but they do get a Miami defense who, can give up some points here and there. So maybe Dameon Pierce can get back on track. And then George Pickens had a touchdown last week, 83 yards. Should have had a second monster touchdown and just dropped it. So if Kenny Pickett can figure his shit out, they are playing the Colts, who are the number one team against fantasy wide receivers right now. So I may look to swap him out. If Leonard Fournette comes back, I expect to see him in the flex spot. Maybe Andy Isabella finally gets his start. He's still rostered. That's so fucking funny. I just noticed that. So looking at these lineups, it's actually kind of tough for me to make a prediction here. It is very, very even. I think because of a few matchup advantages, I think I'm gonna lean John. That's a tough call though. Charlie coming off of a 160 point week, it's tough to say that. I'm gonna go with John here. I like his matchups a little bit better on paper. I'm not either team here winning is not gonna shock me, but I'm officially on paper. I'm gonna pick John. So jumping into the second very important game as far as playoff rate, it's actually only important if Andrew loses, but that is myself and Wade, two teams at 6-5, in kind of a win or go home spot. Very, very interesting matchup here, and especially off of the trade from last week. Kind of poised to make some noise here. And actually, just now flipping over here, I just saw that Raheem Mostert is now questionable and didn't practice Wednesday. Coming off a bye week, that is something that I don't like to see, especially since my other option here is Jamal Williams, who plays during the noon game on Thanksgiving. So I'm probably going to be forced to start Jamal Williams instead of Raheem Mostert against the Texans, which maybe a blessing in disguise, honestly, because Jamal Williams, all he does is score multiple touchdowns when I bench him, which means I'll probably have 5 points this week. Anyway, talking about injuries, Justin Fields separated his shoulder, non-throwing shoulder. Apparently, coach said, you can play. So we'll monitor that situation going forward, but there is a chance he plays. If not, Trevor Lawrence poised to get the start playing the Ravens. Pretty good matchup situation there as well. Now Justin Herbert made a lot of noise about this trade, and he had a pretty solid week. He threw a late interception, which dropped him below 20, but 280 yards, 2 touchdowns, added 17 more on the ground. This week, he should get Keenan Allen off of a snap count. Hopefully, maybe gets Mike Williams back. That would be real sexy. I'm not really counting on it because that was a pretty tough looking injury. I think they may, and yeah, he didn't practice at all Wednesday, so I expect him to be out again this week. Just more precautionary more than anything. Kyler Murray officially off the injury report though, so that's something interesting. Full participant in practice, and because they play the Chargers, do have a good matchup as well. So maybe a tough decision, but it's not because I'm starting Justin Herbert. If Raheem Mostert goes, and at this point I don't think he does, and even if he does, I can't really wait around till Sunday to figure it out. So the Raheem Mostert versus Jeff Wilson in the starting lineups was going to be really interesting, but I don't think it's going to happen at this point. I am starting Michael Carter against the Bears, which if we get to Sunday and Raheem Mostert has fully practiced, I'll probably swap him in there and have Jamal Williams starting. Jeff Wilson does look like the lead back, but against Houston, I think there's plenty of points for both of them there. Ramondre Stevenson gets a pretty favorable matchup against the Vikings, and I do like the Patriots to beat the Vikings on tomorrow night. So if I end up having to start Jamal Williams, which I probably will, it is interesting that both of us will have a running back and a wide receiver go on Thursday and kind of have an understanding of where we sit going into Sunday. Luckily, I get the last laugh with Jonathan Taylor on Monday Night Football. So if there's one person on my team I want going on Monday night to bring me back, it's Jonathan Taylor. I love that man. I would die for that man. Looking at the wide receivers here, when did Wade get Chris Godwin? Don't feel like I remember that happening. So Chris Godwin's in the lineup. That's cool. Since coming back from injury, 9.4, 9.3, 12.5, 8, 10.5, 7.2, 16.1. The one touchdown against Seattle a couple weeks ago, really upping his totals there. Obviously Justin Jefferson, I'm really happy that he just plays Thursday night and I don't have to sit here and dread him all weekend. Coming off of just a very, very roller coaster 2 weeks. You know, he had the 193 yard 30-point game against the Bills a couple weeks ago, and then turns around and lays a stinker against Dallas. One thing about the Patriots and Belichick is they do love to take away your number one weapon and just tell you, hey, beat me somewhere else. So that's what I'm kind of banking on happening against Justin Jefferson here. As far as my receivers go, Scary Terry against the Falcons, I'm really excited about. Falcons pass defense stinks. I mean, just stinks out loud. And Taylor Heineke loves throwing the ball to Terry McLaurin. So really excited about that. I did finally get CeeDee Lamb back. The Giants do have a pretty decent secondary, but I think they're really banged up. I think they're missing a couple corners at this point. So really excited about him on Thanksgiving. Although the Cowboys do just like to pound the rock in people's face. So could harsh my high a little bit there. And then looking down here, Miles Sanders, who got sent over to Wade in the Justin Herbert deal, and then Jonathan Taylor, who has just been my baby doll for 2 years now. Miles Sanders against Green Bay. I mean, you know, the Eagles can run the ball. Last 2 weeks, 5.4, 5.3 for Sanders. He kind of had a tough couple weeks there. Obviously, Jalen Hurts takes away a lot of his running opportunities. And he's played two actually really decent run defenses in the Commanders and the Colts. So Green Bay, very susceptible against the run. Maybe he gets back on track here. Jonathan Taylor gets the Steelers. Now, the Steelers, all their stats are kind of null because they've been missing TJ Watt for most of the season, which obviously is a huge piece to be missing, and that completely changes their defense. So we'll see how they do, but like, you know, last week Samaje Perine had 3 touchdowns against them. So you know, we'll see how much it actually matters. The other thing I worry about with the Colts is, you know, when is the interim crash going to happen? You know, they've done great 2 weeks in a row with Jeff Saturday. You know, when does that finally kind of take a dive? The website has this projected 107 to 105 in favor of Wade. I'm going to pick myself because I always do. So, whatever. Now, just kind of very quickly, the only game between teams that don't matter as far as the playoff hunt goes, really just jockeying for seeding in the consolation bracket and obviously bragging rights at home. The last time we saw this matchup, absolute barn burner. That is Trevor versus Ashley. Last time they played, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill went for 40 points apiece. So maybe we'll get another matchup like that. We just all have a little bit of fun with it. Actually, where is Jalen Waddle? Oh, there he is on the bench. He is coming off a bye, so that makes sense. Fun matchup here. Tua versus Mariota. We got the Flying Hawaiians in the lineup. Although Tom Brady will be back in the lineup, so it won't be that much fun. But the Flying Hawaiians, Josh Jacobs versus James Conner, Kenneth Walker, David Montgomery. Honestly, these lineups look really, really good, and it's just a shame that they aren't really fighting for anything else. Devontae Adams, another monster week last week, 141 yards, 2 touchdowns. He has now crossed 100 yards and at least 1 touchdown in his last 3 games, had 2 touchdowns in 2 of those games, 31, 23, and 29 points respectively. He's the real deal, and the Raiders keep losing. Josh Jacobs, basically every Raiders game goes like this. Josh Jacobs rushes for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Devontae Adams receives 100 yards and has a touchdown or 2, and the Raiders lose by 14, and I don't understand how it happens. There's a breakdown of every Raiders game ever for you. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle get Houston. The issue there is they're gonna kill the Texans. and then then they're just gonna run the ball. So I don't know how effective Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are gonna be. Not because they're not gonna just torch the Texans, but because at some point they're just gonna start running the ball and eat some clock. T. Higgins kind of finally had the breakout game we've been waiting for him, just in time for Jamar Chase to come back. So we'll see what T. Higgins can do. Honestly, Jamar Chase is probably better for T. Higgins to take some of the attention away from him. And like we talked about earlier, the Titans have a pretty bad pass defense. Brandon Ayuk and Devin Singletary. I do think Devin Singletary is going to have a monster week this week. Bill's trying to establish the run. The Lions can't defend the run, so I do think Devin Singletary is poised to have another big week. And then Brandon Ayuk. I don't really know how to predict which 49er is going to go off. Sometimes they all do, sometimes none of them do, sometimes two of them do. I have no idea. As far as picking a winner here, I'm going to go with Trevor. It's projected 118 to 100. Anyway, projected for Trevor 118 to 100, and I agree. I think Trevor's going to win this week. So anyway, that's your matchups, your winners. Raleigh, John taking down Charlie, myself taking down Wade, Cameron taking down Tim, and Trevor taking down Ashley. Anyway, that's it. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone, and let's have a great week.